Welcome to the Friends of Dan Music Podcast. I'm Dan Miles. You've been listening to the music of Rusty Anderson, Afternoon. That was a song called Colleen from their RAA album that was released in May. You may recall that Rusty was my guest back on episode 14 of the podcast. We spoke about his first two solo albums, Undressing Underwater and Born on Earth, in great detail. We also talked about some of his early experiences working with Sir Paul McCartney. So if you missed that, I encourage you to go back and check it out, as we'll be moving on to other topics today. Joining me on Skype from Los Angeles, California is Rusty Anderson. Welcome back.
Hello there, Dan. How are you?
I'm quite well, thank you. I guess the first thing we need to address is the ascendancy of Todd O'Keefe. Your artist designation changed from Rusty Anderson to Rusty Anderson Afternoon as an acknowledgement of his contributions as your writing and performing partner. I have to say it was smart to leave your name in the band name, because this way all your albums still come up in Rusty Anderson search results.
Yeah, it's all about the librarian chops these days. But yeah, Todd O'Keefe, he's basically afternoon in this case. And I'm night and morning this afternoon. So.
I understand you did some kind of contest. I didn't know about it, but the name I would have suggested was the Anderson Council. The name Pink Floyd, it's Pink Anderson and Floyd Council. So I always thought it'd be funny if there was a band named after their first names and there was also a band named after their last names, and your last name is Anderson, so it would have worked.
There's so many wonderful tangents.
No, you went with a better one. Like you said, it's all about the metadata tagging and stuff.
I know, it's crazy these days. But yeah, what we did is we had a contest online to vote for your favorite name, and that's the one that ended up winning. And so, it's just kind of fun to involve your fans and people that are, in from the early days.
If you hadn't gone with the Anderson Council, I would have said maybe Dan Miles Afternoon. So I was in the ballpark. Last time you were here, Born on Earth was your new release. And between that one and your current one, you released a 6-song compilation called Effortless, which we'll talk about in a minute. So the new album has 9 tracks, and the album title is an acronym for the band name, just the 3 letters, RAA, which is less descriptive than previous titles like Undressing Underwater, for example. So what led you in the direction of brevity with the album title?
Simplicity. Rusty Anderson Afternoon is a lot of syllables, so we just wanted something simple and just, actually what happened was it put as the logo on the bass drum there on the front of the record, and then I thought, well, let's just call it that. It's just right in front of you. Just kind of keep it simple, because I have a tendency to make everything overcomplicated, so I made it complicatedly simple this time.
Most of our listeners probably know by now that I also do another podcast with Olivia Dabo, and on that show we were talking about superstition, and we learned the word triskaidekaphobia, which is just a fancy term for fear of number 13. So when I heard Reading Your Lips on the new album with its gratuitous use of number 13, I knew I had to ask what inspired you to base a lyrical concept on that allegedly unluckiest of all numbers.
I don't know. It was just really following the lyrical muse. It wasn't anything mystifying or anything. Yeah, I don't know. Sometimes you got to just leave things open for interpretation, right?
Yeah, normally I would have just said, 13 this, 13 that, whatever. But we just had this long, involved conversation about superstition in many ways. And that's one of the ones you're taught as a kid, to fear the number 13. You don't want to have... people can just go listen to that. I won't rehash that whole conversation, but it's just so funny because as soon as I heard your song, I go, oh man, it's too bad that this song wasn't out when we did that episode. I would have totally featured it.
Referenced it, right.
Right, exactly. But I want to actually play that track for the listeners because I think it's one of the catchiest songs on the album. I mean, I like them all. It definitely has like a feel-good vibe. It definitely demonstrates that you do not suffer from triskaidekaphobia, which I can pronounce but not spell. So let's take an early music break here from the 2016 Rusty Anderson Afternoon album, RAA. This is Reading Your Lips.
This is the 13th bar that I've been in tonight, and you're the 13th face I've seen. Say 13 silver linings telling me to stay. like you. I heard about a party if you wanna go. Would she come too? Your glass is empty and mine fell on the ground. It's getting late, the lights go on, but we don't make a sound. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. Come with me anywhere you wanna go. I'm not exactly sure what I'm asking. So many strangers come and go. Reading your lips, 'cause the music is loud. And I'm only here to watch the show. I'm not exactly sure what I'm asking. So many strangers come and go. Reading your lips, 'cause the music is loud. And I'm only here to watch you. I'm not exactly sure what you're thinking. So many strangers come and go. Reading your lips, 'cause the music is loud. And I'm only here to watch the show.
Well, I do love that song, one of my favorites.
Thank you.
Now, what we're calling the single from this album, it contains references to alibis and investigations and somebody named Sherlock. So the song is called Evidence. What's the story behind that track?
What is the story? I don't know. It's just kind of the theme that developed. I guess it's basically about the relationships that we all have, and like unless you're a Ted Kaczynski type of person, I think the human species is a very social one, and how we all depend on each other, you know, to for a mirror to look at ourselves, and I think that's just what it's about. And I guess it's sort of a takeoff on some of the religious statements and stuff. You know, basically saying that our connection with you know, fellow animals and humans and stuff is really, it makes life real for us, and how important that is that we take care of each other. You know, we depend on each other, and that's really what it's about. The intro for the song sort of came about because I was in my bathroom, I think, and I heard this bird and outside the window repeating this melody, and it stuck with me. I'm like, oh, that's great. And so then I figured out how to play the melody on the guitar, and then sort of found a good key to put it in, and that became the intro to the song.
Wow, yeah, it's amazing when you can be open to sources like that, because I could play the piano at home and the birds would act up, and I go, why won't they be quiet? And I realized they probably hear me playing in here, and they just want to jam with me. They're like singing along, right?
Yeah, they're singing along, or they go, no, I got a better melody, man. Check out my one.
They probably do. You know, Keith Emerson, rest his soul, you know, when he was on the show, he said that he once wrote a tune to a squeaky gate. You know, the gate squeaked in such a way, he got a melody out of that.
Yeah, that happens all the time, squeaky doors and gates. And speaking of Keith, yeah, he was a very dear friend, and we'll really miss him. I'm very sad that he passed. But I guess I'm glad I got to know him the last few years of his life.
That's been one of the highlights of my podcast, interviewing him. That was around episode 50. And as I told people, when I started doing this, I would have never dreamed. I would have been happy to talk to ELP's, you know, light guy or their drum tech or something. And I got the man himself largely because I became friends with one of his childhood friends. But when he died, we did a tribute to him, and some of his closest friends and his diehard fans all contributed. I basically released some unreleased stuff from that phone call. So if people haven't heard that, go hear both Keith Emerson episodes. But in the meantime, returning to Rusty's album and his single, let's review The Evidence. Well, another great track. Before we start talking about some of the other tracks, I want to mention that Gibson Guitars has done you the honor of naming an instrument after you, the Rusty Anderson Signature ES-335. I mean, that's a milestone for any musician when instruments start hitting the market with your name on them.
Yeah. Well, I was really, really happy that came about. We sort of worked on it off and on for a few years, and I thought, oh, this isn't going to happen. And then sort of fortuitously, we with Paul, that is, we were doing these big venues. We played in Memphis, and right across the street from the hotel was the Memphis Gibson shop, the manufacturing shop, and where they have all the tools, and they have these great machines in there, like the ones that make the 335s, the press, and they're really old and original, like where there's pans of oil in the corner, from the oil dripping, and it's like the original stuff. Yeah. And Mike Volz, who was kind enough to meet with me, we got into it, and I said, I really want to check this out and tweak this and change this. And he was open to all of it, and we made all these changes, and I was really happy with the guitar. I was proud because, you don't want a guitar coming out with your name on it and going, oh, this is not the greatest guitar, really,
Oh, no, definitely not. And, the fact that they were responsive to your suggestions and let you really play a role in the development of it, that's nice of them, but it also makes sense because you're a professional guitar player. You know what you like and what you don't like.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I use it out in the field, as they say. So, that turned out to be a really cool thing, and I was very proud of the guitar and that it, came out good.
You did. It looks like a nice instrument. I'll have to get my hands on one. I've been to Memphis. I didn't go inside Gibson. I just looked in the window. I wanted to tour Sun Studios. I wanted to see the Stax Museum, but I was there for work, so I didn't have a lot of time. The only thing I squeezed in was Graceland, and I also saw the museum across the street with Elvis's car collection. Did you make it in there?
Yeah, I did. Those are both really cool. I loved Graceland especially.
Anybody who's an Elvis fan needs to go to Graceland and see it. And anybody who isn't, it's still a good example of a sort of a, effective and sort of classy way to do that. Where will the Rusty Anderson Museum be? Is it going to be in some suburb of Los Angeles or? Yes,
La Habra, California, where I grew up. Land of not much. No, it's a cool little place. Nothing fancy.
Well, I'm returning to RAA. Like I said, I like all the tracks for different reasons. One of them has a very familiar title, though it's a completely different song. I'm talking about The Sound of Music. It's a pretty trippy recording, a lot of interesting sounds, a somewhat unusual rhythm. Did a bird tip you off to that rhythm?
Well, what happened with that song was Todd and I said, well, let's just like freeform it. Let's just write something different, something unusual. Yeah. And we started off with an octagon, and octagons are like a toy. They literally are a toy. I don't know if Mattel made them or something in the early 70s, and they're a keyboard with buttons like those cheesy old organs, but they function sort of like a mellotron or a orchestron or one of those. And you put in these light discs, which are vinyl records, but they're floppy. They're really floppy. I don't know if they're made out of vinyl. I think they are, but light goes through them, and they're really low fidelity, but they sound really interesting and cool and weird and quirky. So we use that as the basic form of the song, and then I learned how to play the parts on guitar and piano and stuff like that, and sort of turned it into a little more, gave it a little fidelity.
There's a line in there, this is how the rumors get started. And so instead of picking that up as the title, why did you Sound of Music is just kind of almost a throwaway in the verses. Why did you want to make that the title?
I don't know, just an impulse. I like the idea of calling a song, we could have called it Jack in the Box or, or something like that, or TRW.
Yeah, it's interesting you say it had a unique origin. I couldn't just put my finger on it, but just as a listener of it, I knew something was a little bit different about it. And so it's interesting to hear why. But got a little bit more of an on-the-nose title with Danny the Doubler, the story of this guy. When I met him at the track, he bet on number 2. The horse took second place, but he picked the winner too. He rhymed 2 with 2, just different spelling. So well played. So Danny the Doubler is an actual person, though.
Well, it's based on an actual person, yes. This mysterious person. And so it was definitely inspired by him. And we just sort of took it from there and had fun with it. I don't know, it sort of tickled me at the time.
Which there's a character in Goodfellas. I was named Johnny Two Times, something like that.
Yes, Johnny Two Times was also sort of an inspiration for it.
Yeah,
nice. Get the papers.
Exactly.
I think, a lot of songs, just to be honest, when I've heard interviews with people, and for myself, it works out this way. A lot of songs, they might start off with an inspiration for it, but maybe, especially if it's about a person, you might combine different people together, different relationships you've had into one song, and to sort of serve the point of the song for the dramatic effect or whatever.
Yeah, create a composite character. Mm-hmm. And if you don't use last names, Danny could be anybody. I was a Danny for most of my childhood. I mean, I think when I started college, when they ask you to read out the role, Miles, Daniel, what do you go by? And I thought about it for a second. I go, oh, Dan. I made the change right there at that moment.
Yeah, I know. Isn't that funny? Yeah.
Yeah.
The power within you.
That's right. Well, the next track I want to play, this is a nice, straightforward rocker. It's called Wishful Thinking Road. I love the bare bones attitude of this recording. It goes without saying that the guitar playing throughout the album is uniformly excellent. But on this track, I would say particularly so.
Thank you, my friend.
Some people use the phrase wishful thinking in a dismissive way to sort of crush people's dreams, or in a way that they think it's a helpful gesture. They try and keep expectations realistic, But now, how are you applying the term in your lyrical concept, and what made you attach the phrase to road?
Well, it's kind of confusing, but this is about another friend and someone who we've been very close, at different times in our life, but find it hard to communicate at a certain point, because I don't know if you know any people like this where you can't get them to see your perspective. They just seem to be off in their own world, and in this case, I think his world is that he wants to paint this really dark, disconnected, dysfunctional relationship with everybody, and I guess the song is like trying to say, I wish there was some way I could give you my perspective, and the world's not so dark as you think it is. Things are good, things are fine. I think his wish is that everything is bad and horrible, even though I think he thinks his wish is the opposite. Some people just like to create negativity.
Oh, believe me, we know those kind of people. We definitely do.
Yeah.
Well, what I wonder hearing you say that is if the disconnect is due to lack of effort to understand the person's point of view or lack of an actual ability. Like I've had both. I've had people where they just don't care about other people's opinions, so they don't try. And I've also had people who try, they just can't grasp what the other person's perception is.
I have no idea on this one. I think it's maybe chemical. I don't know. I have no idea. But, at a certain point you just go, well, then it is what it is. And, no bad feelings, but what do you do?
Well, hey, you took something negative and made something very positive out of it, which is this song. Because lyrics aside, just musically, it's really cool. It's almost like kind of a throwback. It's just real sort of gritty and rocking. And it's another one of my favorites on here. So
cool.
Let's let everybody groove to it. From RAA, here's Rusty Anderson Afternoon, traveling down the wishful thinking road.